So good afternoon again. So today's lecture is going to be a very fun lecture, and you will see many interesting ideas. And specifically, you will see one particular computational model called as the streaming computational model. So let's you are able to see this. So in this whitest tutorials, this there is this tutorial one. The first tutorial it is titled. It's related to convolutions. How to apply a convolution? How to apply a filter operation on an image? You will learn multiple things through this in this example. So number one, you will learn a little how to kind of do some back of the envelope performance analysis calculations. Okay, so rough performance requirements, and what is the performance requirements and the design analysis, whatever the design that we have. This is very much in line with the roofline analysis that we studied in the last class. You learn this. Number two is like you will be introduced to a domain, this image processing domain, how we can do image processing applications, image and video processing, image processing applications on FPGAs. You will learn. And so as a part of this, you will study convolutions, how you can apply a filter or convolution and as an image. This kind of gives us some hints on how we can accelerate deep neural networks, specifically deep neural networks, specifically CNNs. CNNs are very substantially complicated when compared with the image processing application that we will see, but you'll get an idea. And number four, so you will be exposed to what is called as a streaming model of computation. Streaming model of computation. This is all right. We kind of have seen this before, but still we will take a deeper dive into it or relook into it. And data flow model. So how data flow model of streaming and data flow model of computation, we will see. And we will also see image processing pipelines. We will also see image processing pipelines. And then perhaps little bit exposure to what are called as domain specific languages. Domain specific languages. So DSLs for this specific domain. So when we talk of domain specific languages, so yeah, so as the name indicates, depending upon like for image and video processing, you can have a certain kind of language to express computations from this domain. But perhaps for cryptography, you may have something else. So yeah, we will see. We'll take a peek into these DSLs. So let's get started on this problem. So here, the problem that we will be looking at today is, so we have an image. We have an image, and so this is image height, and this is image height h, and this is image width. This is width, and this is height. So we apply some kind of filters or convolutions on this image. Like for example, if we, let me take, yeah, on this image, if you are applying a 3x3 filter, then we apply a 3x3 filter. So we, and this 3x3 filter, it will have weights like, for example, 1.2, 3.4, 0.6, some kind of weights it will have. Okay, so when we apply a filter operation on this image, when we apply a filter operation on this image, so you generate a new image. Okay, so you generate a new output image. So it's not, the output image is not to the scale. Due to lack of space, I am just using this small. But let's say if a pixel here, so what we do is we take this filter, this green filter that you see here, and so this green filter, we initially place it here, and so there will be an image. There are image pixels. There are filter coefficients. You take a dot product of the filter coefficients with the corresponding image pixels, and you get a corresponding, like for example here, let's say when you keep it here, so then you produce the pixel here. Okay, you produce the pixel here, and then you move this filter to the right by 1, and by stride 1, and then you repeat this process. So this is how we compute the output image. This is how we compute the output image by the application of the filter F on the source image. So let me show you a different picture so that it becomes easy for you to understand. So if you see this picture, this is the, so this is the source image. This is the source image. What you are seeing in the leftmost. So this is, so this, so this is the source image, and we are applying this filter. You can see the filter coefficients here are -1, -1, -1, -1, -5, and some filter coefficients are there. This is the filter. This is a filter. This is the output image. Okay. So we take this filter and we move it around. So in order to generate this pixel here, we have to keep this filter no, here. But you can see when we want to keep this filter on this, what happens is the center of this filter. What is the center of this filter? This is a 3x3 filter. This is a 3x3 filter. The center of this filter, no, the coefficient at the center of this filter is -5. We would like to keep this window here, but when we keep this here, then what happens is, so we have to pad zeros here. So we have to pad because when the filter kind of overflows, so we pad up zeros to the image. So GC students, they know this better. So there are different padding strategies. So this is one particular strategy is called a zero padding strategy. You just pad up zeros across around the border of the source image, and then you move the filter. And as you move the filter, you take the dot product. So here in this particular case, we obtain 57 by taking the dot product of the corresponding pixels from the source images window and this filter window, and we get 57. And we move this across. This is how we do what is called as a filter operation on a source image. So there are, depending upon what we would like to accomplish, the way we choose the filter coefficients, the size of the filter. And in this particular case, and we can move the filter also by a stride. Like for example, in this particular case, we will be using a unit stride. That is, we move the filter to the left or to the bottom by only 1 pixel. But if the stride is 2, then after we apply center this filter here, we don't apply the filter to this pixel, and then we move to the next pixel. And then again, we don't apply here, and then here we apply. So these are the places. If it is stride 1 filter, then we apply this filter at the alternate. When we want to do some kind of downsampling operation, then we will have non-unit strides. But if you are not looking for any downsampling operation, then usually we will have unit strides. All right. So this is the problem. This is the problem. And the performance requirement, let's say we are applying this filter, there is a video that is getting streamed, and it's a HD video with this particular resolution 1080p standard. So for a 1080p HD video, the width is 1920 and the height is the width of the frame of each image is 1920 pixels and the height is 1080, and we get 60 frames per second. And the pixel, we use 8 bits to represent the pixel, and there are 3 channels, RGB channels or YUV channels, depending on how the image is stored. And then, so we should be able to, in order for us to be able to apply filter at this rate. So frame width into frame height gives the number of pixels in per channel. And usually we have 3 channels. So into 3 channels into frames per second. So that is 1920 into 180 into 3 into 60. So our system, it should be able to, it should generate 373 MB. This many pixels we will be generating, 370 megabytes of pixels per second we are generating. Okay, 300 megabytes per This is a requirement, performance requirement. So for the problem that we are trying to solve in this class, this is the performance requirement. This is the throughput requirement. Okay, make a note of it. 373 megabytes per second. This is the throughput requirement. So if we if you kind of if you clone this this code base is available, if you there is a software version of this code, there is a software version of this code, and let's see. Yeah. So if you go to this directory, which you should be able to do once you, I am sure this by this time this tutorial should be on your this GitHub repo should be on your machine. Can someone run this? Can someone go to this directory and run this and tell what is the throughput that you are getting on your machine? I did it yesterday, but no, I want you to do it. Can so in the particular machine, no, this they ran it. No, so the CPU throughput is 12.7 Mbps they got. This is what they got. But remember, our requirement is we should be able to process 373 megabytes per second. This is the throughput that we want. But if you just use the CPU, the throughput that we are able to get it is 12 MB per second. Of course, it depends on what CPU you are using. No, the particular way we should not be, kind of be carried away with this, because this 12 Mbps per second is with respect to the CPU implementation that is here. So they just used they generated 3 cores. They have a they did have used some parallelization strategy, but there is a lot more scope for parallelization. All those things are not exploited. By any means, we should not consider this is the best possible CPU throughput that is achievable. If you work hard, perhaps you might be able to get this kind of throughput on your CPU also. Okay, I really want you to to remember this, that perhaps it is possible for us to get this kind of throughput on the CPU also, but the way the code is written in this GitHub repo, so it is giving us this kind of throughput, 12 MB per second. Did anyone give a shot on running this? And can you tell me what numbers you are getting on your machine? And then they also, as I wait for input from you, they have a FPGA implementation for it. And when they ran it on an Alveo card, I guess, they are able to process okay, the FPGA is able to get 68x speed up when compared to the CPU. The FPGA is able to get yeah, this is the throughput. The FPGA is showing this is 840 Mbps per second throughput they are able to achieve on the. So the requirement, what they are able to get is way more than what is required. 340 Mbps per second is the required throughput on the FPGA. So they got 840, and by using FPGA, they are able to get 68x speed up from the CPU version. All right. So let's see the code for the CPU code first. And try to understand how the CPU code is written, and then see how this code is turned into a hardware design. Before I proceed further, I just want to check if you're all doing all right, if you are with me. Can I see a raise of hands to check if you're all with me so far on today's discussion so far? I want you to pay attention because this particular discussion today gives many project ideas. You can, when you are looking for projects, you can take many projects from image processing domain, many projects from video processing domain, and in most cases, when you look at image processing or video processing, convolutions turns out to be the crux. They turn out to be the crux of the, okay. But they could be more complex, okay. But here we are looking at a baseline convolution operation. But this sets up the stage. So now let's look at the code. Let's look at the code. Yeah, so here let's look at this filter 2D dots underscore software, this program. So let's look at this filter 2D function. So as you can see, the parameters to this filter 2D function on line 20, we are passing the filter coefficients. Filter underscore v underscore size is no, and filter underscore h underscore size. They give the dimensions of the filter. In this particular example, the filter dimensions are 15 by 15. So filter dimensions in this particular fam. So filter dimensions. So 15 by 15 filter. So for the time being, ignore the 21, the parameter factor and bias. This width and height, they are the width and height of the image. And stride also ignore, and source is the source image, the image source. Okay, that's a pointer to the image. And destination is where we should write. Okay, source, after we apply the filter, we write to the destination. So this is the function signature. This is the function signature. So if you see line number 29, there is a for loop for y is equal to 0 for so if you see the code here, this is your image. This is your image. So for y is equal to 0, you keep going up. So you are at the outer loops. So you pick a row, and then for x is equal to 0, you go this way. This is the width. So the way you are processing is you are first visiting this row first, and then you are visiting this second row, and then y becomes equal to, so this y is equal to 0, y is equal to 1, y is equal to 2, and then you process this. This is the outer loop. You are scanning the source image row by row. Number one. These are the outer two loops. So this is one loop. This is this is the first loop, and this is the second loop. And then we are applying, if you see line number 35 and line number 37, this is where we are applying the filter. Okay, this is where we are applying the filter. So let's say, so kind of we say, so here we are applying line number, yeah, so these 35 and 37, we go through the filter and we apply the filter. That's what we are doing. And you can see, and so let me pay attention to the code. It's good to understand the code, get a conceptual idea, and then try to look at the code. So here, when this is the place when the filter goes out of the boundary, let's say when the filter is being applied here, so these pixels, they should be zeroed out, and that's what is being done in the if statement that is here. If the filter doesn't go out of the boundary, then we take the source image pixel. If the filter goes out of the boundary, then the pixel value we make it equal to 0. So this is a 4D loop. This is a overall the application of so the application of the filter on the image. It is expressed as 4D loop. 2 loops to scan the source image, and the 2 loops, the inner 2 loops, on line number 35, 37 to go over this. Yeah, to go over this window. Okay, this is how it is being done. Let's keep going. Yeah. So that's all. So this is how the whole thing is done. And this is not actually, this code is not complete. This will actually be a 5D loop, because you have to repeat this process on the 3 channels. So after line number 28, perhaps you may want to write it as for channel 0, do this, for channel 1, channel 2. So there are 3 channels. So you have to apply it on YUV or RGB channels. Yeah, someone got the throughput numbers. 9.71. Yeah, let me see. Tanmay got on M5 2x. Tanmay, so on M5 2x large, you got only 9.8 MB?
Yes, sir.
Oh, a bit surprising. No? And oh, 9 point. Even Harsha also got 9.8. Okay. Harsha, the yours is also on M5? Or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's surprising. Okay. Yeah, so this is the software version of the code. And if you look at host underscore software underscore, this is the place where perhaps we call, yeah, number of runs. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to find the code where where is this one? So where is the OMP parallel? Can someone help me figure out? So there is one place where all the three channels are processed in parallel. I'm looking for that code. OMP parallel. It should be here perhaps. FPGA, load Excel bin, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So here, if you check the code on line number 342 to 349, so we can see this filter 2D function is being called on three different channels. Filter type coefficients are the same. Yeah, YUV. You can see there are three channels. So this Y channel. So pay attention here. This Y is YUV. Think of them as RGB. So these three channels are computed in parallel using three threads. And this OMP parallel, it's a pragma, OpenMP pragma, which automatically parallelizes this code. So let me see if I can run this code on my machine and see what kind of performance I get. I'll share the screen with you in a minute.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, OpenMP is for the multiprocessing thing.
Yeah, that's true. It is for using multiple cores on the machine. Yes.
It's not related to the FPGA thing.
It's not related to FPGA. Yeah, it's not related to FPGA. So if you see, let's see. I hope you are able to see my terminal. So HTOP, I have 8 cores on this system. I think 4, I'm not sure whether 8 hyperthreads or 4 cores, but let's say for the time being, I have 8 cores and 16 GB RAM. And okay. So I'm if you see, this is how at least 5 to 8 cores, the cores numbered 5 to 8, they are not doing much work. Okay. So now I'm going to hardware acceleration, design tutorials, convolution, then software underscore run. I hope I should be able to run it. Okay, bad luck. So I ran it on my machine anyways, in my Linux machine when I ran yesterday. So as soon as I started running, 3 cores have become busy because OpenMP asked for, we told OpenMP to generate 3 threads, to use 3 threads for parallel execution. So it became 3 threads. So 3 cores became busy, and I got around 12.5 Mbps megabytes per second throughput on my Linux machine. It is a Xeon processor machine with some 64 GB RAM. Okay, that is what I got.
So what was the throughput that you got?
I got 12.5 something, which on the web, which they got, some 12, around 12 I got throughput. But my machine is powerful. But even M5 is also powerful. I'm a bit surprised at why M5 on the Amazon No, Tanmay and Harsha got only 9 megabytes per second. So not sure why they have, they got no, lower throughput. Okay, no problem. That's fine. So now let's keep going. So this is the story. So just to recap where we are. So what is we want, the requirement that we have is in order to process a HD video 60 frames per second with the given resolution, we are hoping the throughput requirement is something like 340 megabytes per second. And so Tanmay and Harsha got a throughput of 9.5 megabytes per second using CPU. If they just use 3 threads, and perhaps they are not using SIMD units, and many other things are possible, but the current CPU version they have, it is giving 9.5 megabytes per second. So you can see that in order to get there from here to here, in order to get there, in order to see that, we have to get 10x improvement, at least approximately 10x improvement. 10x? No, not 10x. 34x improvement is required in order to be, if we want to say that, hey, I would like to use FPGAs. By using FPGA, we are hoping for a 34x improvement so that I will be able to process the HD video. That's the story. Aditya got 7.5. Okay, 16 GB RAM. Oh, it's a virtual machine, and okay, good. What is the processor, Aditya?
Just a second. It's mine is Intel i6-core Intel i7, but for the virtual machine I only gave 2 cores.
Okay. Perhaps that explains, yeah, that thing. Okay, great. So now what we will do is, let's see. We want to do, yeah. So now we take this, this code. So you have seen the CPU code. Okay, you have seen the CPU code, and in the CPU, let's say, there is a 4D loop. In the innermost loop, that the outer 2 loops, we iterate over the image. Inner 2 loops, we perform a dot product operation. So it's a 15 by 15 filter. So in order to perform one dot product operation, we require 225 multiply and accumulates, 225 MAC operations in order to produce one output pixel. To produce one output pixel, we require 225 multiply and accumulate operations. Okay, per out 225 multiply and max per output pixel. So this is the kind of compute demand that we have. To generate one output pixel, we require 225 multiply and accumulate operations, because we are working on a 15 by 15 filter. Okay, 15 times 15 is 225, and that's how we get there. So if you take the software code that we have seen, and if you just give it to FPGA, and we synthesize the design on on the FPGA, and we have the innermost loop not be present on the done on. If you keep if you do only one MAC operation per cycle, because that is what is happening, right? So if in the naive method, so what we do is, no, for there is a for height, there is something, for width, there is something, and then for filter, we kind of the filter effects, we go along filter one dimension, and then we Fi, we go along another dimension. So finally we do it, we just multiply the corresponding element from the filter and the image. There is a MAC operation here. There is a MAC operation here. So how does that MAC operation look like? This is like sum is equal to sum plus whatever, something like that. Just let me show that again for you, so that if you see the code, you'll feel more happy. Yeah. Filter 2D underscore software. Yeah. So if you see this code, if you take this code and kind of give it to HLS as is, this line number 48, this is a multiply and accumulate operation. So this is a multiply, this corresponds to a MAC operation. So if you perform one MAC operation per cycle, if you perform one MAC operation per cycle, then you will be requiring 225 cycles to perform. The throughput will be 1 by 225. Let me put it differently. So you are, let's say you do one MAC operation per cycle. This is clear, I'll write it here. This is the one MAC operation. You do one MAC. This is a very naive thing that you are doing. One MAC operation per cycle. Then, so one output pixel. One output pixel per 225 clock cycles. Because we need, in order to generate one output pixel, we have to do 225 max. Okay. So if you're in Alveo, it seems the max speed at which you can run the FPGA is max is 300 megahertz. Okay, 300 megahertz is the max frequency at which you can run. Then then what is in order for us to be able to produce one output pixel, so one output pixel in 225 requires 225 cycles, means 225 into 1 over 300. So this is the time that we need. This is the time required to generate. Clock is 1 over frequency, right? So this is what we have, and the throughput will be 300 by. So let me put it this way. So 1 megahertz is equal to how many? This is where I get confused a bit. So
It should be into
10 power
300.
minus 6. 10 power minus 6.
1 megahertz is 10 power
6.
Plus 6.
10 power 6.
10 power 6. Yeah. 1 megahertz is 10 power 6. Okay. Does this make sense? This is okay. Let's see how this goes. Okay. And then the throughput is 1 over this. That is, if you flip it, throughput, you get 300 into 10 power 6 divided by 225. And if you are measuring the throughput in terms of megabytes, then this 226, this 10 power 6 goes away. And it turns out that no, this value will be 1.4 or something, some 1 point something is what we get. Okay. So let me show this. Yeah. Yeah, so this is 1.33 Mbps is what you get. Okay, if you do 1 Mac per cycle. Okay, if you do 1 Mac per cycle, and then so you are generating 1.33 megabytes per second. And if you look at the input, in order to generate one output pixel, we require 225 input 225 input pixels. So the input memory bandwidth requirement, this is the output memory bandwidth requirement is this. This is the output memory bandwidth requirement. This is the input memory bandwidth requirement is the throughput into 225. This is 300 MB per second. But we know that the DDR bandwidth available is like 10 to 16 gigabytes per second. So the roofline here is not memory. The roofline here is not memory. We are not, memory is not the bottleneck. So any optimizations that you do trying to or related to memory, they are not going to fetch you much. Okay, because they don't get you anything. Okay. So you need to focus on how to improve the computations that you can do. You have to do more computations on using your FPGA. Okay, you have to use 1 point. So instead of doing 1 Mac per cycle, because on an Alveo, so they are talking about the Alveo card. On an Alveo FPGA, perhaps it may have some 5,000 DSPs. So when there are 5,000 DSPs available, you are just using 1 DSP. So you are nowhere close to the peak compute power that is achievable. Okay. So in any case, so this is where so the version 1 of our, so the first effort in moving from CPU to GPU to FPGA, it gave us a throughput of 1.33 MB per second. And in fact, in this process, we lost out because on CPU, we are able to get some 10, 12 megabytes per second. And the requirement is 373. So we need to get a 280x performance improvement. We need to get in order for us to be able to perform, in order for us to be able to process the video on the FPGA, we need to come up with a design which gives 280x improvement.
Sir,
So
how did that, how did that 300 number come?
373, no? This
No,
one?
no, that megahertz, that frequency.
Oh,
How do you
300 is the
recognize?
MAC frequency at which Alveo cards can operate. So we are assuming that no, the design is extremely simple. You are doing only 1 Mac per second. We are not seeing any reason why we should not be able to synthesize the circuit and run it at 300 meg.
Okay, so that 300 is from the data card.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. So when we go for an alternate design, more complex design, you may not be able to run it at 300 megahertz. But our design here is very simple. Okay, 1 Mac per cycle, nothing complex. So we should be able to run it at this speed. Okay, assuming that we are able to get this throughput 1.33 megabytes per second. So the question for you, so this is for you is, how can we move from this 370, how can we get this 280x speed up? How can we get this 286? 280x is crazy, right? It's a very big number. So the current from 1.33 Mbps throughput, we should go to 373. How do we go from here to there? Answers, you should quick. You should be able to tell, guys, this is not at all very difficult. You don't need to do any complex stuff. You just need to do a small thing. You'll get a massive speed up quickly, just like that.
So the inner loops, the last, like the outer, where we do the applying the filter.
Hmm.
So there, instead of doing like there, we can do that unroll, loop unroll, so
Yeah.
that.
Good. Very good, Aditya. So if we unroll, that's a 2D loop. If you just unroll the innermost loop, you will get a 15x speed up. So that is, let's see, decrease the number of loops. As filter values are independent, we can parallelize convolution somewhat. Good. So here, this is the input window. This is the input window, and this is from the input, and this is from the filter. This is filter. We are multiplying this and this. We are multiplying this and this. We are multiplying this and this, and we are accumulating, right? So here it's a 15 by 15 window. All these multiplications we can do in parallel. So let's say if you just unroll the innermost loop, then first we take the dot product of this row with this row in parallel. That is, we get, and then after that we go to the next row. We take the dot product of this row and this row. No, this dot product we completely parallelize. If you just parallelize along one direction, one dimension, you will be able to do 15 max per cycle. So 15 multiply and accumulations per cycle. We are able to increase. So then suddenly, this, so here, the throughput increases into the throughput gets multiplied by 15. And if you parallelize along both dimensions, that is everything, if you compute in parallel, then you get a 225x speed up, because 225 into 1.33. Okay, 225 into 1.333. So that is a big number. So 225, and you are close to, you cross the required Mbps per second. Okay. So just by innermost loop unrolling, you are able to get this kind of speed up. But is there any catch in this thing, like 225 into 1.33? Or do you think, is it possible to get further more speed up more than this? Can you get more speed up than this? This certainly is greater than the required throughput requirement. Okay.
Sir, can we use same filters at a time at different positions? And
Good. So one question, suggestion is, can we use the same filter at different positions? So that is a very good idea. So even before we go there are 3 channels, right? We can process all the 3 channels in parallel. So, and if you see suddenly the throughput that we can obtain, it just goes close to 800 plus megabytes per second. Whereas the required one is 343 megabytes per second. All right.
But with RGB all in parallel, so there it was an OpenMPI implementation where you have different, will be running parallel program or process. But on FPGA, how you will do that parallelly?
No, it's very simple. Actually, you can do it using one kernel also. But you remember that the filter 2D code, we can generate 3 compute units. One compute unit we'll process one channel, one R
Okay.
channel, G channel, B, RGB channels. They will the same unit, but they process on different data. It is like in GPU, as I told, no, like these compute units are highly specialized compute units, and they can perform only convolution. So this performs R, G, B, or Y, U, V. They can do. Okay. Are you all with me so far? See, the base design, all we did is very simple thing that we completely the innermost two loops. You first design one is unroll the innermost loop. Design two is unroll the innermost two loops. Design three is let me kind of so when the initial design D1, we are performing 1 Mac. 1 Mac per cycle. Okay. And in the second design, we do 15 multiply and accumulates per cycle, where we unroll only one loop. And the next design is we have 225 multiply and accumulate operations when we do unroll the innermost two loops. And the fourth design is 225 into 3 into Mac per cycle. So then, and when we do this, we are using the 225 into 3, 600, 675 DSPs we will put to use on the FPGA. Sometimes what will happen is, you might not be able to do step 4 because when you use a low end embedded FPGA, which is designed for embedded systems, it may not have this many number of DSPs, in which case, this could be the max you may get. So you may have to first process R followed by G, followed by B. But even then, if you see, with 225 Mac per cycles, it is possible for you to achieve the required throughput, because 225 into 1.33 will be your throughput that you will be obtained. But there is a very important catch here, which in order for us to be able to perform this 225 multiply and accumulates per second, we need to read 225 input pixels. Let's assume that the filter coefficients, they are present in the memory. Okay, they are present in the they are present. You bring them once and you store it in some registers. But then how do you get the 225 input pixels in every clock cycle? Is it possible? Or even if you, in this particular case, you need to get 225 into 3 inputs we need to get. How do we get it? Okay. So this is an important question. Okay. So while, so now, in order for us, let's see, this is an interesting thing. So if you see this performance optimization, yeah, so here, if you see the third row here, if you see this one, when we are, in order for us to produce one output pixel, we need 225 input pixels. So what happens is the input memory bandwidth now, it becomes 67.5 gigabytes per second. So now memory becomes a bottleneck because the DDR memory that is available, the DDR bandwidth that is available, it is 10 to 16 GB per second. But now we are putting immense pressure on the input bandwidth and memory becomes a bottleneck. So this is the roofline analysis. So earlier compute is, we are doing bad on compute and we did some optimizations. And then we are able to jack up the compute power substantially, but then memory has become a bottleneck now because of the change in design. Okay, so we have 67.5 gigabytes per second. Okay. So yeah, this is the story. So how do we solve this problem? Okay, the 67.5 gigabytes per second, we don't have that kind of bandwidth. So how do we solve this problem? Any ideas on how do we solve this problem?
Using multiple DDRs.
Multiple DDRs also will not take us to that level. Also wouldn't take us to that level.
Transport small chunks of data first, that on which we are applying the filter, and use that like stream sort of the data, like travel by chunks, like divide whole image in 3x, like a small 3x3 image blocks, and then transfer them, because transferring them will not require much bandwidth.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Very good idea. And that's what we will be doing. So what we do is we maintain what is called as a frame buffer, line buffer. This is a common strategy, design technique, which is used whenever we are working with image processing applications. That is, we use what are called as line buffers. Okay. So let's say we are processing an image. So let's say we are working on a 3x, instead of 15x15 filter, we are working on a 3x3 filter. And this is the image width is, it has 8 pixels width and it has some height. So what we do is we fetch when we start processing the image, so we will not be able to apply the filter until we at least get to the third row of the image. So what we do is we wait for, we fetch the first row of the image, we fetch the second row of the image, we wait. And after that, so now in the third row, once we get this pixel 17, 18 and 19, we are ready to apply the filter. We are ready to apply the filter on the input image on this window. Okay, we are ready to apply. So this first 2 rows, we store it in what is called as a line buffer. And then in the next clock cycle, we fetch the next data. Okay. And then we move this window, this filter, we have to move it to the right by once. The interesting thing is we require only one new data item. We don't require, earlier we were talking about getting 225 new input pixels. And when we are working with 3x3 filter, we work with, if you apply the same argument, we require 9 input pixels. But this line buffer strategy tells that we don't require 9 new input pixels, we require only 1 new input pixel. And once we get this pixel, then we are ready to apply the filter operation. Again, in the next clock cycle, we get this data, okay, this particular data. And then what happens is we are ready to again apply the next filter operation. Okay. So, and so that's all. So this is very, very simple idea that we don't need W square, F square. If F cross F is the filter dimension, we don't need, no need for F square new input pixels. We just need 1 extra pixel in order for us to apply the next filter operation. Yeah, this is Aryan Agarwal is saying sliding window. Yes. So this is, we slide the window. Okay. And that's what Aryan is mentioning. Okay. So now you can see that the memory bandwidth is not actually getting multiplied by f square, and we are just getting only one extra, we need only one extra data item. And in fact, by using the that our DDR can supply 512 bits. 512 bits is like 2 power 9 by, how many bytes is 512 bits? 64 bytes, huh? Or 256 bytes? No. 512, yeah, 30.
64.
64, sir.
Okay, 64, you will be able to get 64 bytes. 64 bytes, that means in the next clock cycle, you are not able to get just not this item. You will be able to get this, and next 64 bytes you will be able to get. And if you are able to get next 64 bytes, then one of you suggested that you can keep the filter on multiple positions and do a convolution. So you will be able to do 64 times, no? So remember, so we went from the final figure that we have is 225 into 3 multiply and accumulate operations. We can 3 channels, 225 into 3. Now we can, if you are able to get 64 new bytes of data every clock cycle, then we can increase this, the number of parallel filter operations that we can do. It can be multiplied by 64. And now actually what happens is, perhaps now, if you see 225, 800, let's say 600, 700. Now what happens is, let's say roughly this is equal to 700, 64 if I make it into 60, then this is equal to some 1000. Yeah, so now what happens is, now memory, the number of available DSPs becomes a bottleneck. Okay, because you are able to actually kind of do a lot more, but you are saturating the DSP. Okay, so if you, that's very interesting. So how we are moving through this design space from compute bot, we are not using the DSPs well, we jacked up things, memory became a bottleneck, and then we came up with this line buffer strategy. Once we got the line buffer strategy, no longer memory is a bottleneck. And then what we have is, that we are able to get, we are able to do more convolutions per second once we see this design approach using this line buffer approach. And then now finally at the end of the day, now again we have seen that we can perhaps do more convolutions, more filter operations, more max per clock cycle. And in fact, we are completely saturating the available DSPs that are there on the FPGA. Okay. So this story is very interesting. This story is, are you all, how many of you are completely with me on this discussion? Can I see a raise of hands?
Sir, could you explain that why did you multiply 64 with 225 into 3?
That is because if you are able to, in every clock cycle, if you are able to get, so you, if you see this is, you, after you got pixel 19, you apply a filter, okay? In the next clock cycle, you are able to get 64, since our DDR bandwidth is 512 bits, you are able to get 64 input pixels in a single shot. Okay, so that means I will be able to place this filter here. I will be placed to place this here, because, and I will be able to place this here, so on and so forth. I can keep this filter on 64 different positions on the input image. Does it make sense?
Okay.
You didn't seem convinced, Aditya?
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
It's very, actually, it's not very difficult. If you think of the filter operation, is it possible for you to produce every output pixel in parallel?
So when you say 64, so memory is 64 bytes per second, right? So the clock cycle, the clock would be a much faster, right? So when you are sending, so for in a clock, how you will be sending 64 bytes means clock would not be 1 second.
Well, maybe I just use 64, maybe whatever it is, the point here is instead of, if you just bring one,
Yeah.
you can perform one filter operation, okay?
Yeah,
But
that
instead
I
of
understand.
performing, getting one data, if you're able to get two data items in the next clock cycle,
Yeah,
this one
okay.
and this one, then I can compute not only this and the next step together, I can combine in one clock cycle.
Yeah, that one.
So 64 may not be the right number, it could be a lesser number, but the idea is that if you get more input data pixels, then you can perform more filter operations in parallel.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's the story.
Sir, we're already performing 15 cross 15 max parallelly, right?
We are, yeah, that's true. We are doing 15 cross 15 max parallelly, but without line buffer, you will not be able to do it. You have to use the line buffer strategy.
Yes. And with the line buffers, we are able to do 60, even more.
Yeah, because the memory bandwidth pressure, we reduce it from 225 input pixels per clock cycle to 1 input pixel per clock cycle. If you are able to bring 1 input pixel per clock cycle, you will be able to perform that 225 MAC operations every in every cycle. Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
So now let's look at the code. Okay, let's look at the code. And filter to the hardware. Yes. So the way before we yeah, let's see this. Let's conclude this discussion. So if you see here, we will be looking at a module now. That module is divided into 4 stages. The first stage is what is called as a read from memory. It reads data from the DDR memory, and yeah, and then it output and it writes it to an output stream. Okay, so this is so think of, there is a stream here. There are 4 stages here. These 4 stages are connected by streams, and every stream, it is a kind of FIFO buffer. This is a kind of first in first out buffer. So this is a FIFO buffer. So there are multiple stages in your image processing. This is a very standard image processing pipeline. And in this standard image processing pipeline, so these stages are connected by FIFOs. So there is one read from mem module which reads data from the DDR memory, and it puts it in the FIFO stream corresponding to a module called as window 2D. And this window 2D is what maintains that line buffer, and it extracts a 15 by 15 or 3 by 3 input window and streams it to the filter 2D module. Filter 2D module, it has internally filter coefficients are part of it, and it keeps getting the input windows, and it performs a dot product between the input window and the filter window, and it generates a value and it streams it, puts it in the stream. And this write to mem module, it reads it and then finally writes it to the output memory. And this whole thing, so the important thing is these are all independent modules, and they are connected via this, these streams, these FIFO streams. And whenever the way they work is, whenever if a stream is empty, the write to mem doesn't do anything. If a stream is non-empty, then it, whatever that is there in the stream, it reads it and tries to do the computation. And this is what is called as a data. So you can see there's a combination of streaming and data flow computation happening here. Stream plus data flow computation. That is, the window 2D module, it kind of fires whenever the necessary input available for it to process is there. Okay. This particular model of doing things where your system has multiple modules, not modules, so multiple small modules, and each module is connected with each other via a stream, and there is a natural synchronization that happens between them. Like for example, filter 2D looks at the input FIFO, and if the input FIFO is empty for whatever reason, then filter 2D module will stall. But once it finds a input window in its FIFO, it reads that, it dequeues it from the FIFO, it applies the filter operation, and then it enqueues it to the output FIFO. Okay, so especially when you are working with image processing applications, this is quite common. This is okay. Let's see now the code. Yes. If you see, this is filter 2D. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah. So your filter 2D kernel code, if you see, it consists of 4 modules: read from memory, window 2D, read from memory reads data from the DDR memory and then puts it in the pixel stream. Okay, so it puts it in the pixel stream, and window 2D, it reads from the pixel stream and keeps the data to the window stream, and filter 2D, it reads data from the window stream and puts it in the output stream, and the write to mem, it reads data from the output stream and writes it to the memory. Okay, so this idea is important. Okay, that read from mem, it reads because it not only have to read the input pixels, it also have to read the coefficients. So there is this coefficients FIFO is there and pixel stream FIFO is there. And then window 2D, what it does is it reads data from its input. So if you look at this window 2D module, its input is a pixel stream, pixel underscore str, and it output is a window underscore stream. Okay, and then filter 2D also, it looks at the window stream as input, and it output underscore stream is it writes output to the output stream, so on and so forth. This is how the whole thing is set up. And this particular data type, HLS underscore HLS stream, this data type is very important. Line number 218 to 221, you use this, you can see this HLS stream. So this stream, what is the type of each entry in the stream? Okay, in the case of pixel, so this is, they are using templates. So we have to see what exactly this window underscore window comma 3 is, but essentially each entry in the stream or FIFO, it can be of any type. You can specify the type that you would like to have. And then the pragma here, this 215, the line number 215 HLS data flow, when you use it pragma, the whole thing, all these modules, they are connected with each other via the streams, and data flow, the code, the circuit is synthesized so that it operates in a data flow fashion. And then if you see one more interesting thing that you will see, if you look at, let's look at read from memory. Yeah, this is the read from memory module. This read from memory module, it reads data from source and then it writes to on line number 47, you can see it is writing pixels. If you see this whole loop on line number 45, it is trying to read all the input pixels and writing the pixels to pixel underscore string. That is what is happening, this read from memory module. And then if you look at the write from write to mem, which is the last stage, what it is doing is, it is, yeah, so here this is write to mem. Yeah, it is, we have to take a look at it, but essentially what it is supposed to do is it is supposed to write it to the memory. We can see on line number 69 that that's what it is trying to do. Okay, it is writing to the memory. And this window 2D, this is the place where the actual, yeah. So this window 2D, this is the module, or the function. This function is trying to extract windows. So it maintains this line buffer that we have talked about. I didn't talk about the line buffer details. It maintains the line buffer in what is called as a circular queue fashion. Okay. So the line buffer logic is a bit interesting. I want you to take a look at this and see what is happening. But essentially, it maintains a line buffer, and you can see the number of rows in this line buffer is equal to the filter height. If you are working with 4x4 filter, then we need to have at least 4 rows of the image. So we are, this is what, and the size of each row, it should be the image width. So from the line buffer, it extracts the windows and then it enqueues these windows to the window queue. Okay, so it extracts, and then on line number 134, it writes a window to the window stream. And then finally, filter 2D is where the computation happens. It reads the input windows from the window stream and it performs the actual dot product operation. You can see the actual dot product operation is happening somewhere here. And so we have to see that it gets pipelined and it gets unfolded to the maximum possible so that we get the best possible throughput. I kind of went through the code bit fast, but I hope you get the idea. The key thing here is this, that now what we did is we split the whole computation into 4 parts. There's a read from memory, which reads data from DDR memory and it writes it to its output stream. And window 2D creates windows. It forms the line buffer, generates windows, and writes it to the filter 2D module. Filter 2D module dequeues the input windows, applies the filter operations, it gets the output pixels, and the output pixels are returned to output underscore stream, and write to mem, it reads data from output underscore stream and finally writes it to the memory. So this is the complete story. Okay, there are a couple of hands being raised, so you can unmute yourselves and ask the question. Any questions? Okay.
Sir, all these 4 modules, everything will be part of a single kernel, right?
No, yeah, good question. Yeah, this is all, that's true. This is all part of single kernel only.
Because you have only one read and one write. So you read everything, you process all the stuff inside kernel, divide into different modules, and then finally you write it back to the DDR.
Yeah.
Okay.
In HLS, what happens is, I think the whole thing gets synthesized as one thing, but if you want to generate more compute units out of this, okay, this whole thing, if you want multiple compute units like this, then perhaps we may have to use OpenCL based approach, because right now we are just using OpenCL for data transfer. Otherwise, the FPGA side code is a collection of functions. Okay, So that idea of kernel per se is not there. But I think when we go for a completely OpenCL based approach, then this idea of multiple kernels may come in. Otherwise, this whole thing gets synthesized into one design. I will
Add there, I mean, you can also have, you can also instantiate multiple instances of your kernel once you've specified it in HLS, right?
Oh, even here also it's possible. Like I thought,
Yeah.
no, in OpenCL, when we have one kernel, we can generate multiple compute units. So even if
Yes,
you don't
yes.
use OpenCL also, it is possible to generate, instantiate multiple things. Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
I mean, physically, it's like a compute unit, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
matter
true.
the language in which you specify it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I thought the bindings may have some problem. That's the reason I thought it may have.
Oh, you mean from a Vitis perspective?
Yeah, from a Vitis perspective.
Yeah, so that,
Design perspective, I understand.
right.
Yes. Yeah, anything else you would like to add, Padmini here? Padmini, Lavanya, I mean, any inputs I missed today?
Nothing from my side.
Yeah, nothing from my side.
Okay, so I think, see, the exact code details, I did hand waving. I request you to look at the code, and understand exactly, the syntax and semantics map. The idea, the main intent for today's lecture is what is the target throughput that we are looking for, or what in some other cases, what is the target latency that we are looking for, and what is the baseline that we have, and are we, is compute a bottleneck, is memory a bottleneck? And if compute is a bottleneck, compute is a bottleneck in the sense we are not using, there are available resources, we are not using it. How can we use it? And in this process, are we putting pressure on the memory? And if, how do we relieve the pressure on the memory? What kind of techniques we can use? We have used it so far in this course, two techniques. One technique is double buffering technique, and the other technique today is streaming input technique. So how do we relieve pressure on the input? So like that, so when you are trying to optimize your design, you need to have some kind of sense on what is the problem and what you are trying to solve. Instead of blindly trying out something, you do some change and see what happens. It's all right initially, that's how we do, but with experience, we should try to go for a well thought through design. Where do we, what is our target, and where are we? How do we get there? What are the roof lines? What are the bottlenecks that we are having? And how do we circumvent those bottlenecks and to get to where we would like to reach? So these are the big things you need to keep in mind. So I'll conclude today's lecture here, and we will. So I will announce by end of today, the project ideas will be, not the project ideas, your mentors will be assigned to you. And please do get in touch with your mentors and start working. And there is one lecture that is missed. My October 2nd, there is no class. My plan is I will take an optional class. So those of you who would like to attend, you can attend and record it. I'll post the recorded version so that you can watch it at your own pace. In the next lecture, I will talk about, I will extend this idea. So here in today's class, we looked at only one stage. But in the next class, we will see how, if there are multiple image stages in an image processing pipeline, how we can link them up together. And we also talk about a fixed point versus a floating point data types, which are very important in the context of hardware designs. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you, and have a great day.